Gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of the Liberia History Channel on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of the Liberia History Channel, we're going to be dealing with a very special Liberian. That's the Prince, a Vice Prince, Thomas Edward Besolow. Thomas, a Vice Prince, that's the one we're going to be learning about tonight. Of course, our presenter is Carl Famule. Carl, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. As usual, it's always my pleasure to be here. Today, discussing uh, basically Thomas Edward Besolow and his his people and his story. We'll talk a little bit about the oral folklore of the Bai that he documented, and also we'll talk about what is actually documented about the by linguists and historical anthropologists. So it's going to be interesting. It's a very intriguing piece of both Liberian and Sierra Leonean history, of course, mostly of Liberian history, but because it was the Liberian side that was retained. So it's going to be a journey through history, oral folklore, and then also it explains very thoroughly how people who were traditionally who had traditional spirituality, how some of them became Muslim and some of them became Christian, but then Muslim and then Christian, and probably accounts for much of the religious tolerance among the people of the Bay ethnic group.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. Invite a friend. Of late, Facebook has put restrictions on us, I would say unjustifiably. And so our notifications are not going out. So please share this stream with at least two persons and we can have a show. This is very important and we want everyone to be a part. Carl, if someone may ask, of all the people, why was Thomas Beslow picked for tonight?
Because he has the most. First of all, he's the elder. He's the oldest of the people of Cape Mount who come from this royal family who well documented his roots and his heritage. He's not the eldest ever, of course. We had people who preceded him who became educated, learned to read and write English, and of course, long before that, Arabic. And then, we have the creators of the Bai script. But Beslow, for me, was kind of the one who documented a very thorough chronological history of his personal history and his family's history and his experience. So we're gonna, I just enjoyed his story in his own words, and he was actually a very good storyteller. And then I'm going to, at the end of the presentation, his book that he wrote. I'm going to share that with everyone, and it's accessible on most digital platforms because it's in the public domain now.
Thank you. Thomas Edward Beslow, Vice Prince, 1857 to 1948, an account of the Ve people. So, yeah, thank you, Carl. This is the right way to pronounce it. We all say Vi, but it should be Ve. And
yeah.
I don't know, the time will come, and Carl, there's something I'm working on, is this whole idea of ethnic group. How actually do we call ourselves? These names that we take on, is it people calling us those names? How really we became, how really we became ethnic group? Whose idea was this? Because
or tribes, right? Or tribes, not even ethnic groups. Yeah.
Right. How they all came about and whether we can form new, but that's a whole new story. Tonight we're going to be talking about Thomas Edward Beslow, a Vice Prince, 1857 to 1948, an account of the Ve people. That's Vai people, if you want to call it that way. Carl?
Right. So even today, when my father-in-law and my in-laws are speaking, elders are speaking the Ve language, they don't say Vai, they say Ve in their native language. And when the ethnic group was described in the 19th century and before that, you would hear they wrote it Vey as it's pronounced by the people. I'm not really certain where the word "by" came from with the VAI as opposed to the VEY. But it'd be interesting for someone to explain how that pronunciation changed. I don't know if it's like an anglicized version of it or where it came from, but for the purposes of this show and for authenticity, we're going to say Vey.
Right. And the big guy look like he's from Sino.
But all of us the same people now. Because he fine now, you want clean.
Southeastern people find like this.
Why people found? I have a little bias.
I understand
So
that.
yeah, so we've talked about many times. We've gone over this whole kingdom Koya on the Liberian History Channel. We've talked about the Galinas Kingdom. We have talked about so many things, but specific to this, um, Thomas Edward Besolow was the descendant of the rulers of the Galinas Kingdom, and the Galinas Kingdom was part of a larger kingdom, which was much older, which was Kingdom Koya, which many like to attribute to certain ethnic groups. But Kingdom Koya, from my research, really was a multi-ethnic empire. What we know about the Vey language is that much of the Vey language is similar to Bolom, Gola, and other Mel languages. But we know that ethnicity is fluid, meaning that it's not necessarily stagnant. And when you're an ethnic group or tribe, as Liberians like to sometimes use the word, if you're an ethnic group and you're in a larger network or kingdom, which includes other ethnic groups, there's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of exchange of language and culture. So you'll find that there's elements of the Vey language that could have it be classified as Mendi. There's also elements of the Vey language that are clearly Mel, which is very indigenous and old, and endemic to Liberia, Sierra Leone region, just like the Gola. So what has happened over time with the Vey language is you've had a lot of influx of people coming from the north, both Mendi speaking people and North Atlantic speaking people, as in the Fulani. So this is a group of people who have been conquered, they have been invaded, they have also had the infusion of other ethnic groups. So the Vey are not as they were in ancient times. They have evolved and become more their ethnicity has become more of a, a collaboration or a fusion of many different West African cultures. But the root of it, the language, the root, the underlying core of the Vey people is very endemic to the Liberia Sierra Leone region. And that's clear by looking at the way that they speak, the words. So yes, they do have a lot of influx from the north. Even in the oral tradition, they talk about the people coming down from Mali Empire. Well, when they came from Mali, these warriors, these soldiers, when actually I believe it wasn't even Mali, but ancient Songhai. When the Songhai Empire fell, you have these people coming southwards, warriors. They come and they intermarry and intermingle with the Vey. We also had a long period of which in the early to mid 17th century, where the people of Futa Jalan had conquered the Vai people as well. And so there's a lot of Fulani influence. And then later on, you have a lot of Malinka influence, or Madingo, as we like to say in Liberia. So they have a lot of cultural fusion going on. But the very core of the people, their culture, their oral history, the reverence that they have for certain types of animals in their traditions, those things are very much different from all of those people who came and interacted with them. So this is a picture from the very early 1800s, a sketch, I should say, of the kings of Galinas. These would have been the grandparents of Thomas Edward Besolow. So he is a descendant of these people who eventually became part of the slave trading network in West Africa. And his ancestors were in fact, his father and uncles and other very powerful people in the Galinas Empire were supplying human chattel to Pedro Blanco, who was a Spanish slaver who resided at the coast of the Galinas territory. So they had been part of this horrific slave trade network. So the kingdom of Galinas, modern days, would have been from Cape Mount all the way to what is considered Sierra Leone today, which is in the Galinas area at the mouth of the Macana River in Sierra Leone. And this encompassed part of the Gola Forest as well. So the river, both sides of the river, which you can see on this crude map that was sketched in the 1930s, both sides of the Galinas River, all the way to Sherbro Island. And literally, actually, at some point, the Galinas Empire territory went almost, definitely encompassed Bomi and almost as far as Monserrato. In fact, King Peter Careful, not King Peter, not Long Peter, but King Peter Careful, who they later called the real Zolu Duma. We misclassify King Peter of Cape Mesurado, King Peter from Bushrod Island, who was King Peter Brumley. We sometimes miscategorize him as Zolu Duma, but Zolu Duma was actually King Peter Careful of Grand Cape Mount, of the Bindu area, which is where Thomas Edward Besolow comes from. So King Peter Careful, all of these people, these King Peters we've talked about in the past, are somewhat connected. And they were all eventually got themselves involved in trading human beings. So this is a quote from Thomas Edward Besolow himself, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him, but I like to use his own words because he was so eloquent. You can go ahead, Dennis.
It was in a mission school, Cape Mount, Africa, that for the first time the truth dawned upon me that there was a higher civilization and that the God whom I had worshipped from my childhood was not the true God.
Yes. So this is very important because one of the things that is a very powerful recurring theme here is the loss of the cultural heritage, the loss of regard or respect for the real cultural heritage and the adaptation of Western culture and Western religion. So it is very important for me to say I'm going to be talking about these things without inserting my own beliefs and my own ideas. This is what Besolow saw, and I'm only going to be talking about what happened as it was documented. And I'm passing no judgment on the traditions, the religious or spiritual traditions of the Bay ethnic group, nor am I passing any judgments on Christianity. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. This is not about my beliefs or the beliefs of FOL. This is about what was documented, what happened, and how these people perceive themselves and the religion that they were now adopting. So Besolow was not Muslim. His family was not Muslim, contrary to popular belief. A lot of times people believe that all of the kings and the rulers of Galinas were Muslims. This is not the case. Besolow clearly describes his faith and his traditional religion in his own words, which had nothing to do with Islam. And he did not, so he, unlike many of the people who were converted to Christianity from Cape Mount, he was not Muslim. And so this lineage of royalty was not Muslim. And he very, very clearly documents this in his book. So he talks about their religious beliefs. So he says, here that he considers Western civilization to be a higher civilization. Now, when Besolow was sent to school, he was a young boy. He was about 12 years old. So he was very impressionable. They did not send him to school so that he could abandon his tradition and his beliefs. They sent him to school so he could learn and be a more effective trader or maybe even a cultural ambassador for his people, which is what many of these people felt like. If our children learn the ways of these newcomers, these Westerners, they will be stronger, able to trade and negotiate because they understand the perspective. But more often than not, what happened is they would be converted and they would be taught to think the way that the people who were educating them think, and think about the traditions through the lens of their educators, as opposed to the lens of their parents and the communities that brought them into the world.
So Besolow was educated at St. John's School, Robertsport, Liberia College, and Wesleyan Academy, Wilbraham, Massachusetts.
Yes. So this is a picture of St. John's School in Robertsport. This picture was taken around 1880. So this is a very, very old picture of the school that Besolow would have attended. Now, of course, by 1880, he was no longer there, but this is exactly what the school, I would presume, would have looked like when he was there, or around the time he graduated. So actually, no, I think he would have been at, because he was born presumably around 1857. So he probably was at the school when this photo was taken, which is really incredible. We're talking about the late 1800s, around 1880 to 1885 was when this was taken. And then this, of course, is, just evidence of his graduating from the General College, Williams College. If you look to the right here, 1895, bulletin, it has Besolow having been in attendance there. Thomas Edward, 1891 to 1892. So it's just, records from the school showing that he went there. I decided to dig that up as well, because me, that what I can do. Yeah. So I just wanted to show that there is evidence of his attendance and the records are there. So this just gives a little bit of background. I mean, of course, Besolow had gone on to do other things. Now, I want you to remember that the time period, Thomas Edward Besolow was living in an environment where traditional African traditions were looked upon as being pagan, or they were looked upon in a negative light. So this is the next slide is, you're going to see kind of the mindset. So there's a newspaper, the Montreal Herald, in 1889. If you go to the next slide, and just kind of, you can read what is said about him there.
It says Thomas E. Besolow, a native African whom missionaries reclaimed from savagery, has come to this country for an education that will fit him to labor more helpfully among his race upon his return. He starts, however, with a conviction that what Africa needs most is an abolition of rum shipments, which are largely from this country. He said, don't send liquor to us.
Yeah, so which is important, because if one of the things that they use to kind of conquer and confuse and get people addicted was alcohol. Rum, guns, and ammunition were the tradition to be used in Africa, and those were the devices that they used to kind of destroy the cohesion and the sobriety of our people. So it was really, alcohol was weaponized, and we have a long tradition in Africa of them using these kinds of toxins to destabilize our population, especially our leaders. So a lot of times these wars would be perpetrated by extreme alcoholics, people who had become addicted to European rum, and it became a huge commodity. So Besolow correctly felt that this was a vice that needed to no longer be allowed into the society that he came from, because he saw the destruction that it caused. In his book, he describes the extreme violence and the brutality that came out of the drunkenness of the people in the community and their exposure to alcohol.
So before Kush, there was rum.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all the same tactics, right?
This is House of Epiphany, Cape Mount, 1885.
Yes. So this is again. This is another. This is 1895, but this is another example of what was happening around Cape Mount, what the structures looked like, just to kind of put people back in that time period. So Besolow went on to be an educator when he came back from the United States. He went to Cape Mount and helped to set up the public school system and the educational system for Cape Mount. And so he was a very well-known educator.
And we have his great grandson who's watching, Jerome Dwalo Beslow, say, "This was my great grandfather."
Wonderful.
Welcome, John. Beslow went on to serve as an administrator in the public schools of Grand Cape Mount.
Yes. So these are some random boys from the town of Bundu where he actually was born, where Besolow was born. So these would have been people from the basically the seat of his father's kingdom, and these were probably just different boys. One of the things I wanted to point out is the height here. Now, I don't know if these boys were all the same age, but one of the things that happens when you have an influx of people that come from the north and intermarry and have children with people who were essentially endemic to the area, that were probably shorter and stockier, you have these Masaquays and these other Mende people coming in and becoming Vai, essentially, merging with the Vai population over the years. You have the influx of people of also the North Atlantic background. You have the influx of these Fula people from Futa Jalon. So now you start to see a lot of height variation among the Vai, depending on who their great-great-grandparents were. So a lot of times everybody's not exactly the same and they're not all similar. So not only in language do you see the fusion, but also in physical phenotypical presence, you see the difference. You see the diversity within that one ethnic group. And again, it's because it wasn't, because, ethnicity, especially among people that belong to empires or kingdoms, was very fluid. A lot of intermarriage, a lot of different types of interactions.
Beslow also served as Grand Cape Mount County Attorney and went on to be elected as a member of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, so he served as a member of the House of Representatives in the late 1800s for very actually up until after 1910 or so. Was elected and reelected and reelected. Very much loved by his people. So when Cape Mount became a part of the Republic of Liberia officially, it was because, of course, the Galina's empire was destroyed, or Galina's kingdom was destroyed by the British imperialists. So when that happened, the Vai that found themselves on the Liberia side of the river had to now essentially become Liberian, and gave up their crown, gave up their kingdom, and to Liberia, and gave up their slaves to become citizens of Liberia, because they owned people. There was human chattel, almost chattel slavery going on. So it was very necessary at the time. The Liberian government told them, yes, you can become Liberia. We will protect your territory, but you have to give up your crown. You cannot have a king within the country. You are now under our constitution. You no longer have slaves. Your slaves are now our citizens. It was very, very powerful when Cape Mount joined Liberia.
So Beslow is writing now, Chahu and some legends of my people. I was born in Bendu, Upper Guinea, Africa. Just when, I do not know. From the best of my knowledge, it was in 1867. No town clerk entered the fact upon his record. No wise census taker put me down in his great book. Bendu babies are born and then just grow. That's me. No trouble about clothes. No christening. No Sunday school. Day comes and day goes. All were just the same. I never was taught a ABC. Imagine and picture to yourself a naked little urchin rolling around underfoot, mouth full of sand at times, and feet in air, and playing as children play the world over, be they heathen or Christian, happy and miserable by turns, making little trouble, needing little care. I looked more like a big black spider than anything else and grew to be a strong child.
Mhm. Yeah, I think he was just so poetic.
Yeah,
Um, but you can see the undertones of a sense of superiority or inferiority in the context of culture. And this again, because he's learned to read and write under the conditions of a Christian school, which has taught him that heathenism is what his heritage is, and that civilization is what he's being taught. So he exudes that in his, I mean, he exudes that in his writing um, consistently, uh, because that is how he was educated to think of himself and his people. Um, but I do believe that his words, his book is such a beautiful read because it's just so incredibly poetic, the
yeah,
way he expresses, you know, um, himself. Now, I do want to say that 1867 is not anywhere near accurate. If you read the Historical Dictionary of Liberia, Dr. Dunn has it estimated about 1857. We don't know if that's even true. He may have been a little bit older than that, but Dunn put about 10 years because it didn't really make chronological sense as far as how old he was when he started the school. He would not have been, you know, two, he would have been more like 12. So that's how they presume that he was born in 1857 and not 1867, because they're assuming he was around 12 years old,
right.
not two, when he started the school. Because many things had happened before he started school, so he wasn't two.
Boys, under the guidance and direction of some older men, who enter the outskirts of the woods and spend an exciting hour in hunting, most often for the wild cow. Our guide blew a shrill blast on his horn, and we heard his cry of, "This is Pella now. Vi, they, Ikia, which means seize, seize," laughing and gambolling like satyrs dragging the game we had caught after us. We would rally around our guide. We built a large fire. If we had killed a deer or any animal whose flesh was eatable, we would skin it and throw its carcass on the coals. While the game cooked, we would join hands and dance about the fire, whooping and yelling, laughing and poking fun at one another in the illimitable child fashion that is the same the world over. I poke fun at someone else's expense always. So this is where by Tamia Moore, being of royal
Yeah,
the the
just so incredibly poetic.
yeah,
Now, in this next slide, he describes his mother. And I apologize for all the reading, but I really just love the way he tells the
okay.
story. So I don't want to talk as much as more than I need to, but he talks about his mother. And I do want to remind everyone that the Galena's kingdom was a merger of basically two royal families. They had many kingdoms within the larger territory. And so his mother was from the other side of the river, and his father was from the Cape Mount side. And this is also the story of his nephew, King Momuru Masakwe, as well. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But he was, this one was the uncle of Masakwe. And he talks about his mother's story. and how women became how a princess would marry a prince. You can go ahead, Dennis.
Being of royal birth, the price set for her was so high that no one but a prince or king could hope to possess her. Father saw her when she was first home and fell in love with her. 2 years afterwards, he went to his parents, as all vain men are obliged to do when they wish to marry a woman, and told them he wanted her for his wife. They never make any advances towards a girl till they have first seen their own parents. Then father's parents went to negotiate with mothers and asked them if Jessa could be purchased for their son. Mother's parents consented, and father married mother and established her at Bendu, where by right of her birth she held the first place among the rest of his wives. Of course.
So now you can see some of the influence of the Asiatic Abrahamian religion. You see some of the influence of the Abrahamic Islam, really. You know, the thing with the polygamy and having multiple wives. So already the culture is deeply steeped in a lot of fluidity, meaning other things have come in. So the Bay culture is not an isolated culture. So you do have cultural traditions that are universally Northwest African, and this is a very good example of that. The idea that you're purchasing a wife, these things are very Asiatic in origin, even though we practice them normally now. Historically, if you go back far enough, these things were really introduced. I mean, not recently, you're talking over a period of about 900 years. So but as far as the coast of Liberia and Sierra Leone, they would have been much more recent than 900 years ago of that introduction.
And
You can
that's the
go ahead, Dennis.
understanding, right? Like the bridal price being purchased.
Yes,
This,
that buying women is something that was introduced
yeah.
with slavery, unfortunately, but it is still, and now we just take it to be normal.
Often she told us legends of our tribe, which
Oh,
had
I'm
been,
sorry, Dennis. Before you read, I just want to say something. So his mother, being royalty in her own right, was clearly an educator because in this sense she must have been extremely powerful. She knew the people who in our traditions usually tell young people their history are the very wise ones, the people who are extremely knowledgeable in the society. So she wasn't just any woman, even though we established she's a queen. This woman now becomes the griot for the culture. She is now the one that bestows the knowledge of the people upon the children. This is a very powerful thing. This is something that usually is done from men to boys. Here is a woman now playing the role of a griot, giving the oral story, the oral history of the people. So this is Thomas Edward Besolow's account of what he was taught by his very powerful, his very enlightened mother about the history of his people. And then remember, we talked about, I think you and I were discussing folklore versus history. This is folklore.
often she told us, that is, basically talking about his mother now,
Yes.
legends of our tribe, which had been handed down from generation to generation. How the first settler of our tribe was a strong and powerful man who came with no companion but his wife. She bore him many children, sometimes giving birth to 3 or 4 at one time. These children, when they came into the world, were full-fledged men and women. At a little over 1 year of age, the females would bear children, and so, in this way, the territory soon became populated. This first ancestor, Hera, was a very kind gentleman and loved his sons and daughters,
And taught them,
and, and taught them of the gods and of their duties to these.
yes. So this is oral history that When I ask very old people from Cape Mount, they no longer remember. This man documented this in the 1800s. This is very powerful. And this is why it's important for us to write things down. If he hadn't written this down, we would have a distortion of it, which is what was passed down orally, is a distortion of this story. But because he received this information from his mother, who was a queen, and wrote it down, now 3 generations later, we can read it exactly as it was passed on to him. It's very important to write things down. Continue. He goes on with the story on the next slide. Dennis?
Yes.
Okay.
He was of gigantic size and weight. So heavy was he that his footprints are yet shown embedded in the rocks, which yielded his touch, mother said, like so much soft clay. He was so strong that he could shake mountains from their foundation. And it was from him, Besolow, that you and your people get your great strength.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's how this oral tradition can pump us up, and you feel.
But that is what they're for. This is a picture of him with his father. Possibly his older brother, possibly his father. I believe this is his father because he claimed that he only had one brother. And Besolow was older than his brother. And the source, the photo said that this was his brother, but his brother was younger than he. So this must have been his father.
So from this, you can tell that one is younger?
Yeah.
So the man in the gown is the father?
Yes, because the man in the gown cannot have been his younger brother, even though the source said it. And again, a lot of times these people were just, anyway, this is, but we do know this is Besolow and their relatives in Cape Mount. And again, they resemble so much.
One of
so
Harold's,
we're going to go on with the legends.
one
So that's he
Harold's,
in a picture of him and his father or his relative, possessing great strength. And we continue with the folklore.
One of Harold's sons was his father's equal in strength and weight, and was a wonderful elephant hunter, thinking nothing of feeling that immense animal by one well-directed blow. Then his son was famous and powerful, and so on for 2 or 3 generations. No stories are told of the kings and princes for the next 100 years. Then comes a story of another king, a fable in our country, similar to the Greek fable of Mercury.
Yes. So I want to say something about the way he ended. A fable in our country similar to the Greek fable of Mercury. So here he's saying, our folklore and your folklore are similar. But he had to go to these Western schools to be taught about Greek fables. But fortunately for him, which is very unfortunate for many of our people, modern citizens, is that we don't learn about our folklore at our schools in Liberia. We do learn about Greek folklore, and right, we learn about Greek history, oral traditions, and fables. But he was fortunate to have been born into an era of both worlds, so he was educated in both ways. Today, if you ask a student at any school, in a Catholic school or Episcopal school in Cape Mount, if they have any knowledge of the folklore, if they learn that in school, of course their answer is going to be no. So this is very important that he was able to make that connection as a student between, hey, we do the same thing. This thing that you guys think is such a great oral history, we have it too. I thought that was very important. This is a photo from Sir Harry Hamilton Johnson of two Bay women. I just like the photo, so I popped it in here because it's
Mm.
all about Bay people today. But
Yeah,
I very much,
beautiful.
they were supposedly, according to Johnson, these were regal women, extremely, extremely beautiful. They look to be tall. I'm looking at their headdresses, the very richness of the gowns. These were people with extreme dignity and pride.
This king could fly with amazing swiftness, far out of reach of the weapons of the foe. He would fly before the army of his own tribe and ferret out the hiding place of the enemy, who dreaded the flying chief as if he had been a demon. Using his Bible language now, demon. He fell in love with a beautiful woman who belonged to a neighboring tribe and married her. She knew nothing of his strange power of flight, but discovered him one day in the act of flying away. His arms filled with immense rocks, which he intended dropping one by one upon the heads of his enemies, who were unfortunately her own people. She betrayed him to her people, who stood upon him while he was sleeping and took his wife. Then was there much lamentation and mourning and weeping among his friends. And from that day to this, my son, mother said, there has never been any flying chief born to the people.
Yeah.
How often in the dreary, sorrowful days that I have lived since, I have thought of those happy hours and wished for my native country that is so far, far away. New
Okay, so
scenes,
I'm sorry. So we ended the folklore. I
yeah,
wanted to talk about that before we transition into the. So that is a synopsis of the folklore of the Vai people based on the history of a woman, oral history of a woman who was probably born around 1820, 1825. She probably received that oral history from people who were born in the 1700s and going backwards. So what Dennis has just read to you, what we have just shared, is very, very important key cultural records that we should keep alive and compile and teach them to our children the same way that our children are being taught Greek mythology. Very important. Now we're going to talk about his childhood. And again, I'm using a lot of his direct language because I feel like he was just so eloquent and poetic in the way that he delivered his story. Instead of me doing what I normally do, which is just relaying and talking about it in my own terms, I prefer it to be his words. So sorry to cut you off, Dennis. I just wanted to transition to now he's going to start talking about his childhood.
how often in the dreary, sorrowful days that I have lived since, I have thought of those happy hours and wished for my native country that is so, so far away. New scenes do not efface the memory of the dear old days, nor do they dim the memories of my mother. I can recall her tender eyes and her gentle voice when she drew my brothers and me about her as lovingly as any white mother could, and talked to us of our father and the respect and duties which we owe to him. She told us to be true, brave soldiers always, and to die rather than show one trace of fear in battle or in contest of any kind whatsoever. She taught us of our gods, the respect we must show to the moon, the reverence in which we must hold the sacred crocodiles, and the love and worship we must feel for Kanaba, chief and king of all gods. How our childish eyes will open wide with fear when she told us in stirring tones of the penalties dire and awful which we would bring not only upon ourselves by disrespect to any of these gods, but also upon the whole tribe.
Yes, very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. The idea that, clearly this is not Islam, this is not Christianity. Kanaba is their supreme being. This is the name that they call the creator, Kanaba. And he talks about the reverence that they have for the things of creation. A lot of African cultures show reverence to the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon control the environment, right? The moon, the gravitational pull, controls the ocean waves. The sun helps to nourish life, grow your crops, all of these things. It's not that these things are worshipped, it's that it's reverence, it's the power of the creation that they are showing homage to. So here they're showing a sense of, he's calling them king of all gods, but if you really look at the culture, this is really monotheism, because they're saying really Kanaba is the god. Everything else is just forces and things that Kanaba controls. Very, very profound. And I can see how a person who was raised this way can transition to another religion of monotheism. But it's just to point out the obvious, which is that many people think that all of these rulers, these kings, were Muslims, and they were not. As recently as the 19th century, this is very obvious. And so it's said most often of Mamadou Massaquoi and others, but this is the same family. This is the same family. And the picture that you're looking at, Dennis, I just liked it again, of a mother and her daughter. Her daughter that's standing, like a 21st century supermodel. I just thought she was just so glamorous,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a direct ancestor of Tata Miato Fambula or something, but I mean, just for nothing glamour. She just there like, look, I would stand like this, very, very regal. But this young woman and her mother were part of a larger family, royal family, that was photographed around 1900. And she is just an amazing, amazing, graceful. I mean, the way she's posed in this photo. I just thought I'd share that with you all.
This is Rubber Sport, June 27, 1897.
So before you read this is just basically a record of that captures his presence, and then his nephew Mamaru, who they spell his name a little bit differently, but it also shows King Mamaru and their presence in Cape Mount, and it's basically just a communication from President William David Coleman. Go ahead, Dennis.
You are directed to observe in future the following instructions for your guidance in receiving and disbursing public funds. 1. The checks and orders now held by A. Wardman, R. J. B. Watson, Thomas E. Besolow, Morara Massaquoi,
which is Momoru Massaquoi.
Oh, okay.
Oh, but they just spell it the way the way the people would say it.
Which were registered in accordance with my instructions are to be taken in payment of their custom dues. 2. All other merchants shall be allowed to pay their custom dues in the following proportions. In government script register has aforesaid, and D has an X in money. 3. After the Register General government orders now in the possession of the merchants have been redeemed or paid, no general government orders shall be received in lieu of duties or paid unless said orders are countersigned by the President. 4. After the retirement of the above registered script, you will require all persons paying custom duties to pay at least half of said dues in money. William D. Coleman.
Yes. So this, I chose to share this because this is a demonstration of an annexation of the royal family who is used to being the recipient of taxes and tribute from the lesser chiefs and headmen. Now they are responsible to pay taxes to the Republic of Liberia. This is clear. Momoru Masakwe, a prince. Thomas Edward Besolow, a prince. These are the last monarchs of the Kingdom of Galenas, of the Vai Kingdom. And they are now, by 1897, fully annexed by the Liberian government and become taxpayers to the Liberian government. There's no more, there's no other more potent way to present this. This is not a sad thing and it is not a happy thing. It is what happened. Because the parts of the Galenas territory that fell under British rule, those descendants on the other side of the river, not only were they annexed by England, but they also lost their land, their right to even own property. And here, at least in Liberia, they become citizens. Citizens, not kings with slaves with human property. Their former slaves and servants are now also citizens just like themselves. Very, very profound transition at this period in history.
These people know style, man.
Yeah. So I, like I said, I just like to share these photos. Again, our very thick woven country cloth that you see all over Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, especially Liberia and Guinea, in the forest there, from the western to the north and central region. This is the country cloth that we would weave on looms, and these are two Vai women, and the way they wear this set is just incredible. I just wanted to share that. These women were photographed around 1900 as well.
I think we saw this picture before.
Yeah, so this again is the Epiphany House. You can go at so Langford Memorial Hall is the next slide. In Cape Mount, this was photographed around 1880. So this is these are places. I'm showing these photos because the other thing that happens with the annexation of Cape Mount, because if you remember, Cape Mount was not originally part of the Republic of Liberia in 1847. It was a kingdom unto itself. It was when the British wanted to conquer the place and the parts that remained that they resisted with force decided to join with Liberia so they could remain, free of British rule. So when this happened, many of these young people were then sent to schools to be educated so that they could be future leaders. And this was happening very rapidly. So all of these buildings, these schoolhouses were popping up in Cape Mount. There was also a sizable population of recaptured Africans at Robertsport who are now interacting and intermarrying with these established, people of Cape Mount as well. So the descendants of the priests, the descendants of the kings, the descendants of the slaves, the descendants of recaptured Africans, the descendants of African Americans, everyone is going to these same schools together and making up the new population of Grand Cape Mount, which is now a county and it's now part of the Republic of Liberia. Many people do not realize that Cape Mount was actually part of Liberia. Many people don't I'm sorry, was not actually part of Liberia in 1847. You know, they don't. Many people don't realize this. So we can go to the next image, please. So these are they call them masons. So these are young men that are being trained to be bricklayers, to be construction people. This is at St. John's Academic and Industrial School. This is around 1895. These are young, mostly by some recaptured African children, some descendants of African Americans, but mostly by children at St. John's Academic and Industrial School. So everybody is now becoming Liberian. So especially, you know, at Robertsport there. And then these young men are I'm sorry, they're supposed to be painters. I don't know what happened there, but these are more students. It looks like around the same year, 1895. The man with his hands folded is the instructor. And there you have it. It's an industrial school. They're teaching these young people skills that they can use in this new changing world, where they can be productive citizens as the new Liberians. So some of these children, their parents would have been indentured servants or enslaved laborers to the Bai royalty. They're now going to school. Their parents are now citizens. The children of the actual royalty are also going to school. They're now citizens. So it is a very incredible time, a changing time. Now Cape Mount is part of Liberia. This is a little bit concerning for me. These are supposed to be volunteer construction workers. And you can see they have, like, you know, mason stones. They're clearly carrying these rocks on their heads, on their shoulders. This is hard work. I don't know what they call volunteer construction workers. It reeks of forced labor to me. Maybe they did volunteer. Maybe they said, oh, you guys are bringing schools, you're bringing this, we'll just build your buildings. You don't have to pay us. That's a possibility. Or it was like, you know, you have to do this. It was very common for missionary schools to compel the communities to work for free, to build the mission schools, to build the, you know, the roads and do all these kinds of things. It's very common practice to compel people to do these things. So when they use the word volunteer construction workers, I'm thinking compelled construction workers at Cape Mount. So again, most of these people would have been the labor force of the royalty, the forced laborers who had already been essentially slaves, and now they're being compelled to work for the missionaries to build schools. So even though they've been liberated, you're now citizens. You're no longer the property or under the rule or the you know the trusteeship of or ownership of this royal family. You don't have to work on their farms anymore. But now we're still going to use your labor without compensating you. So that for me is something I needed to point out. So they were citizens, but not citizens the same.
Because this man, his face doesn't look like he's volunteering.
Well, the people say that volunteer labor force, but most of these laborers in Cape Mount were actually the people who had previously been the property of the royalty of the leaders of the place. They're now being used as workers to build all those fancy buildings that we were showing you in the previous slides. So that's how they build Robertsport. So we're going to go over some important Bai people or Bay people. Joseph Jeffrey Walters is the first African to write a work of fiction in the English language. And he's Bai, or Vay. So this is a Ve man who was the first African, not West African, just African period, to do a work of fiction in the English language. And he published this in 1891. It's a book called Guyana Paul, and it's really about the life of a Ve princess. It's based on the true story of his own mother, but it's a work of fiction.
I think Intermiata Formula sings about that princess.
Yeah. So these are some of the things that Liberians have done. And this was published, like I said, in 1891. Instead of us reading Things Fall Apart and not this, this book is very, very, and he's so ahead of his time. This book is about the oppression of women. This book is about the strength of women. This is basically, womanist theory. I don't like the word feminist. It's African womanist theory is what he's writing here. Joseph Jeffrey Walters. And this is a man who is a feminist, writing this very powerful novel, work of fiction about which is based on the triumphant spirit of the women who brought him up. And this is also in the public domain, so it is available on many digital platforms online. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there. So his name's Joseph Jeffries Walters. I don't know what his name was before he went to school, but I don't know but he was from either the Massaquoi clan or the Besolow clan. He's related to them. So this is a family member of theirs who took the name Joseph Jeffrey Walters when he went to school. And then, of course, we can't talk about the Ve without talking about the Ve script. There are not that many original scripts in the world. What we use to read and write the English language, the French language, the German language, and many other languages is actually a Roman script. Ve is one of the few original scripts on the planet. So people say, oh, you can also write Basa, you can also write, those scripts are not original scripts. The Ve script is very, very unique. Even in the African context, I think there's linguistically only 6 original scripts produced on the African continent. I'll have to look that up, but this is very, very rare. And this is a national treasure for Liberia because we don't have this in many of the other countries in West Africa. This is something we should be very proud of. And I would even say we should be teaching. But this is an original sample of it. And of course, Mamulu Dualu Bukale was the one responsible. He was born around 1785. And the first, and some people say it was created in the 1830s, but I've been able to find record of its existence going back as far as 1819. And I want to believe it may have even been older than that, but again, it's difficult to pinpoint. Next slide, please. Yeah. And then, of course, the Right Reverend Theophilus Momolu. His name was actually, Theophilus Gardner was actually Momolu Fakai before he went to school. And Momolu Fakai's father was actually a Muslim and Islamic imam. He was an imam. He was an Islamic priest. And so he sent his son to the Western school to learn, for what we've been saying about everybody else. Go to the people's school and learn and come back and, you'll be an ambassador, a cultural ambassador. Well, he went and changed his name to Theophilus Gardner and became one of the first indigenous bishops. But Mamulu Fakai did not go back home to be a Muslim and to continue the ways of his father and become an imam. He decided to be a bishop instead, a Christian bishop, but just another important person from Cape Town. I wanted to, there's so many, but I just, sharing a few, and then we can open the phone lines or close. You can go to the next slide. And of course, the nephew, the beloved nephew. I mean, Besolow absolutely loved his nephew, who was probably about 10, 12 years his junior. So this is, his uncle's son. And King Momuru Mazakwe was born in 1869. He died in 1938. He was born to King Lahai Masakwe of the Galenas Kingdom, and his mother was Queen Fatama, not Fatima, but Fatama Bendu Tendamani of Njabaka. Njabaka. I can't pronounce these things. I'm so sorry, but y'all can see it written there. So, the Queen Fatama Bendu Tendamani was from what is now considered Sierra Leone, which was the other end of this kingdom. So Mamadou Masakwe ended up, when the British conquered everything up to the river, and Masakwe and his army fought the British vigorously. But unfortunately, there were Vai people on the other side fighting for the British, as it normally is. And they were able to push forward all the way to the river. But it was at the river that they were able to hold these people off with the assistance of the Liberians. And as a consequence, they have a choice to make. Are we going to be annexed, or are we going to be Liberian? And they chose wisely. The descendants are Liberian today. They chose liberty over annexation. Gave up his crown, gave up his slaves, and then becomes a Liberian government official instead. Now he had to pay taxes. He and his uncle, all these people are now paying taxes to the Liberian government. He also, as you know, became the minister, or at the time secretary of the Department of the Interior. So he became the minister, the equivalent of the Minister of Internal Affairs, because he spoke many languages. Most of the royalty were able to communicate in multiple languages. So Mamadou Masakwe, the powerful. And then this is Mamadou Masakwe with his daughter, his beloved daughter, Princess Fatima Masakwe, and then his son Bani in this photo here. And this is another picture of Fatima, very, very beautiful woman.
Yeah.
She's the one who told the freemans to stop calling themselves freemen and call themselves Fambula. You have to tell these people that you're from somewhere. We're not going to go by these English names. You are no longer. So all of the freemans, Auntie Miata Fambula's father, who started his life calling himself freeman because of Princess Fatima Masakwe, said, no, Fambula, not freeman. And many of the freemen, it wasn't the other way around. Most people think that the freemen were Fambula and they changed to freemen. It is the exact opposite. And she was instrumental in instructing people to stop using English names. So Henry Fambula Sr., H.B. Fambula's father, changed his name to Fambula, and many of his brothers and others. And it's because of Fatima Masakwe.
Why? They were not originally Fambula, but changed to Famula?
So everyone, of course, had by names, but she insisted that the Freeman clan, which was these are her family members, changed to Fambula. And many of them did. Some still carry the Freeman name.
Yeah, it still have some.
Mm-hmm. So this is a picture, the most recent picture I could find of them of Queen Fatima from 1976. So you have Rachel Johnson Masakwe, and the wife of Prince Abraham Masakwe. We have Prince Abraham Masakwe, and of course we have Madam Princess Fatima Masakwe Fambula, and Moses Seaton. They're holding Moses Seaton Jr. So that's the son-in-law of Princess Fatima.
Because they are Vivian Seaton, husband, and that's Vivian's mother. Vivian Seaton has been on FOL a couple of times. That's how I know.
So yeah, Moses was. This is so Moses was probably about 2 years old in this picture. So this picture was taken in 1976. So one of the things that this is the book. It's called "From the Darkness of Africa to the Light of America." You know, this is a really offensive title, but it's full of so much beauty. And you know, remember when you're reading things from the 19th century, to always read in context and understand, you know, the context of the history, what was happening at that time, and why is it important for us to sometimes suspend our modern lens and think of things in the context of the time period that they were occurring. Put yourself in their shoes and in their understanding in order to make sense of it. This book was published originally in the year 1891. So it wasn't, this is not a recent thing. So we have to remember that the way the world was at the time, Besolow was a man of his time. So uh, I picked the gold out of the dust, out of the dust, and I polished it and I cherish it. It's very, very powerful knowledge that he presents in this book about his upbringing and then sharing these beautiful poetic accounts of his childhood. Very, very important. And I recommend it again. It's on in public domain, so you can find it on any digital library source at no cost because it's public domain. Maybe give a little donation to whatever platform you use, but it is there for public access.
Say from the darkness of Africa to the light of America.
Yeah, and if you go to the next and final slide, um, he dedicated this to his only brother William E. Beslow and his nephew Momoru, which is King Massaquoi, um, whom I hold in loving thought, he says. I mean, this is just, he was just such a poet. Um, so, you know, he dedicates his book to his brother and his nephew, who was almost like his little brother because they weren't that far apart in age.
Yeah, I like the especially when you wrote about his mother. I've not read the book, but it reminded me of how I wrote about my own mother.
Oh, wow.
You're right. And so, if you want to take a quick look at that, in 2015, I wrote about my mother. 15. I say it was 27 years when she left us. That was the anniversary
Yeah.
of her passing. So check it out. I put the link there for you to read it and see how Beslow copied from me.
You see so.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to join the conversation, please call the number 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Please call and hey Jerome, call. Let me know what you know about your great grandfather. Just call the number there and be a part of the conversation. The Liberia History Channel is by far the only history show about Liberia on the planet. Of course, some are trying to do that, and we really, really love that we keep talking about Liberian history. So please watch the show. Sometime make a donation so that we can get some of the materials that we want.
Yeah.
And, for the show. So please do something and support us, and let's keep this show going. Call, the number is on the screen. That's 605. That's a teleconference number. Call that number and you will be on the show as well. That's Thomas Edward Beslow, a Vai Prince. And we learn a little bit about the Vai people. Maybe after watching this show, you should know now and call them Vai instead of Vi. Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's try that and see how it goes. And I like, that you mentioned also some great people from the Vai kingdom that
Yeah.
we talk about. We talk about Momolu, King Massaquoi, uh, Dualo Bokili, and all these great people.
Henry Fumbler.
Right, Henry Family.
We didn't have his picture there, and his very political children, his descendants. Um, yeah, I mean, I for me, it's extremely important for us to examine um, our entire country and the contributions of all of these various diverse people to making up Liberia and appreciating all of it as our collective heritage. We had the show about Besolow 360. I hope people watch it. I put a lot of work into that and a lot of work. But those are things, those are stories, those are things that we need to know. This is information that our children need to know. And this is stuff that should be part of our curriculum. It should just be normal and natural for us.
Yeah. Let's get in some comments here.
Okay.
Oh, Basa Barry said greetings. Hello. Greetings, Jabari. Elvis, hello to all. And Mianta Stella Heron, thank you for sharing the show. Zulu Koye say hello. Eddie say good evening to all. And Zulu is even taking a step further, say ma call. Mianta say first time that I've heard Zulu Duma being mentioned. The Johnson Street Bridge is named after him. And
So
yeah,
the Johnson Street Bridge, not to interrupt, but the Johnson Street Bridge was really named after Peter Brumley. They shouldn't have called it Zulu Duma. Because Peter Brumley is the one who was at Bushrod Island. King Peter Careful was all the way in the very western part of Cape Mount near the McKenna River.
Careful is the Zulu Duma.
Yeah, Careful is King Peter is the King Peter who was Zulu Duma. So it is actually an error because it's a different King Peter that was at Bushrod Island, and that's who they were really dedicating the bridge to. But now his probably distant cousin gets to get the credit, and his name lives on.
Again, so Jerome said that was my great grandfather. Moses Mamalu said, "This is amazing. I wonder this is another Momoro."
All the people in Cape Mount are related.
Said, very true. Only real poor men do that. We're talking about, if you meet a woman, you don't make advances. You go to her parents and your parents. And Zulu said the real poor men will do that. I think say we were robbed. I remember where we were when they say we were robbed.
We're robbed. You're robbed of your crown and your slaves again.
Right, and then Mama will say, "Call is only trying to make it fine, but we were robbed." And Evans Morris, the Ve ethnic group has produced some of the most educated and intelligent Liberians. Yeah, the Southeastern took over that long time. That's right. So Jerome say, and you say, "Why people lazy were warriors." You see how King Momolu fought.
Yeah, they fought for that territory. That's so true.
Right. So stop saying why people lazy. And I spoke to.
I think the laziness got to do with farming. And let me tell you a little funny tidbit. The reason they say they're lazy is because these people employ a lot of slaves, enslaved forced laborers to do all their farming. So when you hear the Pella men say why men lazy is because they're making the Pella people, which most of their indentured servants were of the Pella ethnic group, they were making them do all the work.
Right. And I interviewed a Vi man on this show, and he said the reason they call us lazy because we are clean. We do everything quickly, and we come and sit in our white clothes and sit in front of the house while they are on the farm. But we finish working, and so
no. What I said is really the reason. It's not a good thing.
So we're talking about the formulas, the Freeman, and all that. Jerome said the Besolows, the Massacre, and the formulas are just one family.
Yeah, this is true.
And they say, I really appreciate you showcasing this. We thank you too for watching. Evis, a great presentation about a great Liberian citizen. Moses says Sarah Besolow Yanti, the highest ranking UN official, is the great granddaughter of Edward Besolow.
Yeah.
Okay. Zulu. So this is Zulu to my grandson.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of family people here.
I said the country is so small, Dennis. When we start getting into all of the different things, you'll start seeing people coming out of the woodwork. People we've been taking for granted, they're all royalty.
Right.
We take everybody for granted. We're all descendants of royalty.
So we are talking about your grandparents and you don't give a cool water, sir?
I know.
But thank you, Carl. We don't have any caller now, so
Okay.
let's wind down and see where we go next.
Absolutely. So our next emphasis is going to be on so I'm going to talk about the Grebo, the great Grebo political forces. Netisie Brunel, and all of this long legacy of the Grebo people with the big queen names,
Right.
most of them. Dan Marias, you all these people, the thorns in the flesh of the government of Liberia. So we're gonna do our next presentation is gonna be on many of these wonderful contributors to the advancement of the cause of Liberia, and even some of the great detractors of against the cause of Liberia. We're going to talk about who they were, what they did. So Dan Marias, Netisie Brownell, some of our Grebo vice presidents and senators, and talk a little bit about that. And it's gonna be a nice show, and not because Dennis is the host, but because it's another interesting topic. So what we're gonna try to do going forward, Dennis. Yes, of course, we gotta talk about Dennis and Dave, the two great sons, and of course, but what I really wanted to do going, a little bit forward is really just touch on. I'm not going to really touch on every ethnic group, but on certain areas, regions, and some of the great people that they were able to produce. I'll go on from there, and we'll talk about some crowd people. We'll talk about some people from different areas and different parts of the country, how they became part of Liberia, when, and the circumstances surrounding it. A lot of people don't realize that the entire coast did not become part of Liberia at once. So we get into I call them the hard-headed Marylanders. We get into the hard-headed Marylanders, and I say that with the greatest affection. But we get into these very strong-willed people who became part of Liberia in 1857, I believe. They were not originally part of the country in 1847 either, just like Cape Mount. So so as we're doing it in a process as they're annexed. So original Liberia was coastal Grand Bassa, Montserrado, and Sino. And then you got Cape Mount and other places being added later in Maryland and so on. So we're going to now go to Maryland, and we'll tell the story of the great high-head Marylanders, all the way to President Tubman. We'll just pick on a few of them.
And you can see how that is relevant. And also join us tomorrow for Tough Talking Thursday. On Tough Talking Thursday, we talk all kinds of things, including politics. This Thursday, Dr. Emmanuel Yeyia, who is the Vice Standard Bearer to Tiawanse Gonglo on LPP ticket, will be here to talk about why Liberian should choose his team for the presidency and what are their chances, what are their plans for the country. Join us on Tough Talking Thursday with Dr. Emmanuel Yeyia. You don't want to miss it. And Call, is very important that we are talking about these people, the great people. We talk about Besolow now, or the Ve people. We're going to talk about the Grebo. And please watch out. I'm going to be breaking it down in standard Grebo so that you will see that When I was doing the show, someone would say, "Oh, with all the things happening, you guys doing history. In other words, discuss some of these current issues, right?" And I'm happy we're doing this because it gives you an idea of, first of all, where we come from.
Mm-hmm.
Look at these great people. Sometimes, if you were born in the 90s, you think that it's all being war and Ebola and all the noise.
Yeah.
And so it is very important to sometimes take a break and look at history, because what we see now is going to pass very quickly. I mean, how soon, as Madame Sirleaf or President Taylor, they are of the past now. So these things pass very quickly. The things that we think so much of, that we spend so much time on, but the history helps us to really understand what is happening now. Because as we will be talking about the Grebo people, and as we talk about Cape Mount, if you think for a minute, things that are happening today, you could see why they are happening based on what you read and learn in history. So I'm very delighted and I'm very happy that we are doing this. And thank you so much for the tons of research hour you put in to be bringing this to us.
Absolutely.
And let me break this news. The Sapo ethnic group, which many believe as a subgroup to Crown. There's a new banknotes that were printed that took by the central bank, and they have the ethnic groups of Liberia 16 with their masks. So the people of Sapo sued the central bank, say, why is it that Sapo, which is recorded in our history book as one of the 17 tribe, is not listed here? So you are putting us out of Liberia. You are making us less Liberian. So they sue. The case now is in court. This is just to tell you, our country. And so it is important to watch the Liberia History Channel and learn these things.
Right. Anyway, they say Africa unite, you say Africa divide. So these are important things, though. Even though what you said you're interested in defining, first of all, why are we still using tribe?
Yeah.
And defining what an ethnic group is. Tribe is very diminutive term. We talked about this in the past, and most of the world has gone away from using that to describe whole language groups. The tribe is really a subgroup of a language family. How do we want to look at this? We need to revisit these things. There needs to be a think tank around some of these definitions, and also reclaiming the names of our people. Right? We're using words like crew to describe people. It's very derogatory. Gyo means slave. We use it to describe people.
Yeah.
And this is something that we need to seriously examine as a country. Do we want to continue with these things? But anyway, thank you very much, Dennis. This has been fun for me. I enjoyed this show. Hopefully people will watch it when they wake up in the morning.
All right. And thank you. I want to thank our viewers for watching. Always focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Until then, we end with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Whether you are they, you are Glebo, you Mandingo, Congo, Crew, or Loma, we are all Liberians. Have a good night and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our